Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Gilda Evans, bringing you the Autism Resource Podcast. This podcast and the ARP website are your one-stop knowledge and resource space for autism and much more. I'm happy to have Steve McConnell join me as my guest today. Steve has a background in biology and is a practicing lipidemiologist. His research and advice are sought out by physicians in many areas, including cardiology, kidney disease, and most recently, various neurodiverse conditions. He joins us today to discuss managing challenges often presented for those navigating the autism spectrum and more. Welcome, Steve, and thanks so much for taking the time to join me and discuss the work that you do.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
So to start with, can you discuss a few of the current approaches to managing these challenges mentioned for individuals on the spectrum?
Well, I'm somewhat intimately familiar with it. My whole family has chronic anxiety syndrome. My mom's going to be 93 in December. My brother's already 70. I'll be 70 next year. My sister's going to be 73 next month. They're all on, I think it's Trintellix, a psychotrope. They tend to have mixed effects, but there's side effects, and it isn't really working that well for all three of them. I don't take it. My work is my best therapy. So when I have, I guess, a panic attack or an anxiety episode, I deal with it by doing something constructive, and my mind focuses on that. I've got mild Asperger's. My father was more classic, profound. Um, he loved his family, but in the holidays, he could only take 15 minutes out in the living room and he'd go back in his den and close the door and do work. I didn't know what Asperger's was. And when I did know, I didn't think that it affected my family until we set up two clinics. And the doctor at one of the clinic was my best friend. And I brought a lot of people in to get better care. And he right away realized my mom could run for public office. She just talks and very charming. And my dad didn't say anything. And he's the classic guy in the computer shop. They don't want the customers to meet, but they go out of business if he wasn't in the back fixing the computers. That's me. And he said, I have jovial Asperger's. It's not really a diagnosis, but he had to come up with something to explain to his staff my unusual behavior. But I had gone to a psych and he was going to put me on some basically brain dope. It was something you give to bipolar. I think he saw me as being bipolar. That just speaks volumes about not recognizing the spectrum. And I did try, I think it was either Ritalin or Adderall. To me, they're just prescription crystal meth. And it didn't do anything for me. So I mainly manage my behavior by trying to be conscious of it, make eye contact, try to read people, even though I'm horrible at picking up on cues, and not talk as much. Try to listen, ask questions, and more often than not, I just explain. I have mild Asperger's. I said so. I hope that doesn't uh, confuse or annoy you, but I do have value. And when I realized the extent of the problem, how many people have it, and there really isn't any viable treatments that have come up from the industry to help. In my work with these advanced testing companies, there is a marker you can order. If you have a provider willing to order it, it's around $50 now. It's a one-time test, it's genetic. But if you treat it as if it's positive, you can tell if it's there. Well, it's highly prevalent. They calculate 70, 80% of anyone on the spectrum. That's what they call methylation deficiency, which basically means you can't convert over-the-counter folic acid into the active methylfolate. Same with B12. You can't convert cyanocobalamin, cobalamin is B12, to the active methyl B12. And the drug of choice, which is one of the few things that actually works, but insurance doesn't want to pay for it. So it doesn't matter if it's a prescription medication, is methylfolate alone. And I didn't notice, as you'd expect, I have Asperger's. My wife noticed because she got angry with me one morning because I ran out. And she actually said, "Are you still taking those orange pills?" That's when I realized, oh, maybe I'm easier to manage by my own wife if I'm taking methylfolate. Well, that was the beginning. Now I know that there's at least 15 natural, safe, non-prescription therapies. Most of them are inexpensive that have some value. And if you're treating an individual, not only are they individuals, but they might be on different parts of the spectrum. So, not to make it sound like a shotgun approach, but I think that if you have a minimum of 3 to 4 components in a single capsule, make it easy, and more people will likely benefit than if you put in one thing or two things, because the methylation defect might not affect everyone equally, but if you have a couple other things in there that are known to help with behavior and anxiety and so forth, that's got to be beneficial. So that's why we're talking today. I have combination therapy coming out for kidney disease, but for autism spectrum, it's identical to what I would give an Alzheimer's patient or dementia patient or somebody with neurological damage. It's basically a treatment for the entire neurological system, not just the brain, but everywhere in the body. And the data is more than compelling because it's not one or two studies, it's dozens. And hardly anybody pays attention to this. And usually, if they're trying to make money, they just focus on one therapy and try to show the benefit there, when it's far more logical to use 3 or 4 separate things in modest amounts to see an overall benefit in a larger number of people. And it might not be profitable to the industry at large, but it could be a better approach than what the industry has offered us thus far. Because I've already tried what the industry normally uses. You're hyperactive, they give you a form of a stimulant. If they think you're bipolar, they put you on a drug that basically dopes you up. And the lipid clinic director, my best friend, Dr. Dave, said, "I don't want my lipid specialist all doped up."
Well,
So I never took the script.
Well, Steve, I want to expound just a little bit on what you were saying just a minute ago. You referred to certain medical literature that mentions some natural compounds, like you were referring to, that are shown to have significant benefit. So would you expand on that just a bit and perhaps share the short list of those compounds that seem to have the maximum positive response with the largest percentage of individuals?
Okay. As I mentioned, there's a huge relationship overlap between these different neurological deficits, whether it's Parkinson's or peripheral neuropathy, brain fog, loss of memory. Well, you're dealing with people that don't have normal physiology. In fact, one of the clues is the blood-brain barrier isn't normal, particularly if they have the other gene I like to order. I only order 2 when I can, which is ApoE. If you have a 4, you're very high risk for Alzheimer's and dementia. You're also high cardiovascular risk. And the blood-brain barrier, which only allows certain things into the brain to pass through, is defective. So the things you need, like DHA, which is an omega-3 from fish oil, that's what the brain's made out of, and all your nervous tissue. And things like folic acid, folate, don't get through. Only active folate goes through. And fish oil, like any oil, has no charge. It's non-polar. There's no charge, negative or positive. But if you add on a phospholipid attached to the omegas, they go right through the blood-brain barrier, irregardless of whether it's intact and normal. Well, the one thing that comes up all the time, and it's ancient therapy from Ayurvedic medicine, which is like the Chinese pharmacopoeia, goes back at least a couple thousand years. In India, they've got a very similar, and quite often they overlap. They just have different names. Ashwagandha is known as Indian ginger, but it's not ginger. And it is fairly miraculous It removes beta amyloid, which is a big issue. Dementia and Alzheimer's, that's not the whole cure, but there's tons of literature on cognition, behavior, anxiety, people that have behavioral disorders that are not pathologic, but that changes their ability to function in society. And it turns out the Latin name is Withanthia somnifera. The somnifera just means it can relax you to the point that if you're having a hard time sleeping, when you finally lay down to sleep, you'll get a better night's sleep with ashwagandha. It's incredibly safe. There doesn't seem to be any toxicity with it. And I'm working through what the therapeutic range is, the minimum amount that would work versus how much can I squeeze into a single capsule, and still have it work. I'm challenged with that. The other components, I mentioned the B vitamins, ashwagandha, flavonoids. Flavonoids are highly antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. They're unilaterally safe and effective. And they know for a fact, a couple that I use in cardiovascular management have a far wider spectrum of benefit, particularly for people on the spectrum. One in particular, isoquercetin, which is a more absorbable quercetin. There's a million flavonoids. I don't need to go into that. The DHA I mentioned, which is the main component in fish oil that helps maintain normal brain development, repair, and so forth. Because the brain's just a big glob of fat. And the primary fat is DHA, and they think the hominids on the savannas of Africa developed more rapidly and got larger brains, mainly because they discovered DHA from protein in the water, fresh water or marine. So there's no question there's benefit there. And the methylfolate I mentioned, there's several other things, like the phosphatidylserine. Now that's a phospholipid. And if it's attached to DHA, the fish oil, will go into the brain. And the brain needs phospholipids to function normally. And there's a short list of them, about a half a dozen. But the one that's specific to the brain, the nervous system, is phosphatidylserine. And to get it into a capsule, even though it's wet, it's an oil. There's a guy who makes it with a phosphatidylserine in a dry, like pelletized form, so it wouldn't interact or mess up the efficacy of the dry components. So that's my vision, is to have ashwagandha in there, methylfolate, maybe a couple other B vitamins, definitely niacin. And I save that for last because they usually go overtime with that. But niacin, nobody knows how valuable it is. There's probably 100 people in the United States that truly understand everything it does. And I'd like to think I'm one of them, because there's 400 genes in the body that will not function normally without niacin. And some of the ones that are cardiovascular won't even kick in till you get up to pretty substantial amounts, at least 1.5 grams per day. But the amount that improves cognition, repairs nerve endings, and maintains brain health are 100 milligrams, 200 or 300 milligrams. And the same is true with kidney disease. And a lot of people always bring up NAD. Well, you want NAD and you want to pay less and get more in your bloodstream. Don't blow $100 or even $30 a month on NAD, which is nothing more than no flush niacin. If you take real niacin, it passes through the liver, and now you got NAD for pennies. And it's actually twice the blood level as these expensive no flush niacin supplements, NAD riboside, NAD copper, all of them. They're kind of BS drugs because people don't want to deal with real niacin. There's a lot of mythology there why they don't want to. But it's more important to understand that you're wasting money if you just take NAD. And NAD is critical for the brain because it has its own tree of metabolites, and they're all essential to brain health as well as the peripheral nervous system, NADH, NADHP. There's a million of them, and they're all beneficial. And Cleveland Clinic actually, in my opinion, committed a criminal act by trying to make it sound like they're dangerous, which is ridiculous. If everybody listened to them, we'd have a pellagra epidemic out there.
Oh,
because
no.
that's when niacin was first appreciated. Was the United States had a horrible pellagra epidemic. It was people that weren't getting enough niacin. And if you suddenly scare everybody about niacin, you're going to have a problem. Plus, cardiovascular events will go way up.
All right, so I have another question for you. What do you feel are the best ways then to evaluate the efficacy and tell if there's actually a positive change?
I'd have to reflect on when I mentioned my story of my wife. I forget what she said. I was at my desk. I was getting ready to begin my work day. I was already working. She had to go to work. She drives to work. I work from home. And she said, "What's wrong with you? You're acting like a little child." She goes, "I got to get to work. I don't know where your car keys are." She goes, "I don't have time to babysit you." She goes, "Are you still taking those orange pills?" Well, that told me that I may not see an improvement, but others around me would. So I think more than half of it, probably three quarters, is have a checklist of behavioral checks, particularly that were already observed in that individual, and then see if any of those seem to have been improved. Hyperactivity, ability to stay on focus. Are they making better eye contact? Are they doing a better job at reading other people's cues that the average normal person already has learned to do? And I think it's largely qualitative. There might be some measurable tests, blood work, urine. I'll have to look into that, but qualitative isn't bad. It's just not quantitative. But if you have a child on the spectrum and there's a benefit, you'll probably notice it long before everyone else, and maybe the school teacher. And having said that, my mom dealt a lot with kids who didn't have a name for it, but they were like me, only way worse. And they were alleged to never be able to finish school, let alone go to college, and might have to live with their parents the rest of their life. But she was able to get them to read and write, very fundamental skills that enabled them to survive, move out of the parents' home, and hold down a job. And it was basically love and just smothering them with attention when they came in for tutoring. So the whole school district used to center these people. If anything, I inherited the ability to be a good teacher from her. And I think that we could throw something together that's probably well established already. How do you diagnose Asperger's? Well, you take that list, and I checked almost all the boxes at least half. And there's different flavors there, whether they're profoundly autistic or mild or severe Asperger's, hyperactivity, the gamut. What's unique to each one? Do they have separate checklists, or can we come up with a primary checklist and then have a special one if we do know which area on the spectrum they sit, and then evaluate them one more time before treatment, and then, like the scientific method, look for improvements in 3 months, look for improvements in 6 months, and so forth. That's probably a very reasonable way of going about it. Plus, it doesn't require a laboratory testing and the cost. It's just somebody who cares about the person will help in the evaluation, because I don't think the person who's suffering, and I don't really suffer, it's just I always wanted to be like the normal kids.
And I see you putting that word normal in quotes.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I now recognize is some of the highest functioning jobs, there's somebody with autism or Asperger's doing the job. Scientists are disproportionately more often on the spectrum. Doctors, and that's why when doctors meet me, I can almost see them go, "Oh, he's like me," And you talk to the staff, and the staff is, "We do everything but wipe his bottom." He'd be totally dysfunctional without us, but he's the guy with the medical license, generating the jobs for all these caretakers in his office that keep him on task. Well, I think that the people around the patient are the best people to determine clinical success.
Yeah, I
And
would agree with you on that. But I do have one last question for you, though. What do you think is the most important takeaway from our discussion for our listeners?
Hope. uh, I'm real big on quoting movies that I like. And I'll admit it, I'm a big baby when I watch certain movies because they touch me. And my wife loves to watch me cry because it just reminds her that I am somewhat human in spite of everything else. And Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption, they're talking about uh, the hope of getting out of prison. And Morgan warns him, says, no, hope is a dangerous thing. I don't agree. At the end of the movie, his buddy reminds him that no, hope's a good thing. There may be no reason for it, but without hope, or at least expressing a desire to not give up, is everything. And boy, do I know that. And I think that giving the patient, and equally important, maybe more importantly, their caretakers, their friends and family around them, if they have hope, that's a powerful motivator. Because if you've got something that could improve the quality of life, not just for the patient, but the people around them, I wouldn't call it a miracle, but it justifies having the hope.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And I agree with you. Hope is something that's very important. And thank you, Steve, so much for your time and for sharing your story with us today.
No problem. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast. You can find it on Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify, and other popular platforms. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you would like more information on this topic or anything else we've covered on the Autism Resource Podcast, visit us online at www.autismresourceproject.org/podcast. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover in the future, contact us through the website or comment on any of our social media channels. And be sure to check out our growing website often, since we are continually adding useful information and resources. I want to thank our listeners for sharing their day with us. This is the Autism Resource Podcast, and I'm Gilda Evans, reminding you to take care of yourself and that special person in your life.